Hello, my name is Koen Stevens. I'm sitting here today together with a specialist in employer branding. I will introduce him to all of you in a minute. The idea today is to have more of a typical webinar. So we're showing real life cases, no fluff. We're talking about real numbers, real companies, and that's how we want to do it today. So I'm very happy that all the way from the Netherlands, we have this amazing employer branding specialist. It's even international travel, I think, these days. So Yves Pilet, welcome to the show. Can you maybe share a little bit about your story so far?
Yeah, thank you for the great introduction, Koen. Well, I've been working on employer branding for about 15 years. I've developed my own methodology, used that methodology to advise different clients. And most people haven't even thought about employer branding 15 years ago. They thought, well, this might be something interesting to think about, to use it. But I was always very interested between the connection of HR and communications. And still today, I see that these different staffs within an organization have a difficulty to understand each other. So I'm happy to be a mediator for these kinds of organizations. And I see that the aspect of employer branding is growing. It's becoming more important, especially since the mid-90s. The war on talent got more and more important. And it started off with large organizations like Coca-Cola, thinking about how can we use our employer brand. But nowadays, even smaller organizations are thinking about using their employer brand as well.
Okay, cool. So maybe before you talk a little bit about your specific blueprint methodology and the excellent book that you wrote on the subject, what's your take on the time frame? Because you just discussed it briefly, but to be honest, when I talked about employer branding, I thought it was like this new trend that originated like a few years ago. But then, and we have an interesting slide on this, then it seems that indeed it isn't a very new concept. So what changed, or how did employer branding evolve over the years? Do you also see specific COVID-19 impact? Because I see a lot of organizations behaving in a different way these days, and it's not always a good way. So I think the true nature of a lot of organization is coming out these days, and sometimes they are obliged to do so. So it's a very hard balance to find. So I think it's more important than ever to focus on employer branding these days. Is that also something that you sense in the marketplace today?
Well, a variety of questions you pose, but let's start with the development of employer branding. Like I said, in the mid-90s, it became more and more important. And one of the reasons this became more evident is that you see a lot of change in the demographic developments between the different countries. In the old days, let's say around the 1950s, to give you a typical example, most people had a lot of children. The average in Europe was about 5 children per family. And the average age of people wasn't that high. A lot of people thought, well, how can we improve our lifestyle? It's not just about having enough children, but we want to become older. So sanitation had to improve. We had to think about also different ways of communication. In the 1950s, it was a lot about mass communication. But if we look at the development around the 90s, on a global scale, the average birth per family was around two children per family. So the influx on the labor market was a lot smaller. Yes. On the other hand, from the 1950s onwards until now and even into the future, technology will become even more important. Connecting this to, for instance, the COVID development, everybody is working from home. Online is becoming more and more important. A lot of people, especially the older generation, is not very used to working online, but they are now forced to work online. So this requires a different skill set from the employees, but also from the employers themselves. Thinking about what kind of people do we need now and into the future. And if the influx is getting smaller because of lower birth rates, and the choice of the people who are active on the labor market is widening, it's difficult to attain the right people for your organization. At the same time, the business cycles are becoming shorter and shorter. So companies have to develop and think about who we are as a company themselves. So it's very important to find the right people at the right time. That was something that was very different in the 1950s. There it was about mass communication, thinking about a large industrial plant, for example. And if you would, for instance, would like to work at my plant, I had enough choice on the labor market to see who would like to work at my plant. But nowadays, if people don't really like to work at your organization, they start looking at different options, and the market is becoming more transparent. It's very easy, for instance, via social media and internet, to check what kind of organizations have new vacancies, to develop your own skills, to work on, for instance, in the weekend on your new training program. So the options for employees is becoming radically more important to choose between different employers. So it's basically about having more choice and the market becoming more transparent.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the same at Ambessify. So Ambessify is an online platform to streamline internal but also external communication. So employer branding is on the sweet spot a lot of those different segments. And what we are actually seeing during these COVID-19 times is a lot of companies are looking for ways to keep engagement high with their employees. A lot of times those employees will be at home and they will move back into the office in the near future, but they want them to be ready, they want them to be engaged, and they want to keep the engagement levels high. So we actually saw a lot of new customers signing up during this period of time. And that's also one of my main questions a bit later in this interview, how you see all those different disciplines coming together, or do you see it as subsets from each other? Very curious to hear your opinion on that subject. By the way, to our viewers, please stick until the end of this conversation, as we'll be doing a mutual giveaway for the people that cope up until the end. So that might be interesting to talk about later in the conversation. Okay, great. Yves, I also saw on your website, LinkedIn profile, that you have done quite some stuff in this area. You wrote a book. It's on our book table right here around employer branding. You also have developed your own methodology. Can you maybe quickly talk about that before we deep dive into the real life cases? Yeah.
I'm not sure how many hours you have to talk about this
We have
methodology.
6 hours.
Okay,
scheduled.
that's great. Let's elaborate. No. When you think about my methodology, Blueprint, it's basically based on 4 different stages. Because what I saw is when people talk about employer branding, they want to immediately produce action. They want to go into the action mode and think about labor market communications, which is fine. But I've always thought, and you see it in these COVID times as well, it's more important to think about what you stand for as an employer. So what differentiates yourself from other employers? Because as I explained, employees have more choices of thinking about where they want to start working. So Blueprint is separated into 4 different stages. The first phase is about search. It's about what is happening on the labor market in your relevant sector, and how is your company evolving, and is your company attractive as an employer or not, and which aspects are interesting. As soon as you found out based on data research and talking to your personnel and your customers, you can start thinking about your strategy, which is the second phase, the think phase. So what do you want to do to attain the right target groups? And how are you going to attract them? And this is not just about internal and external communications, but it's also a lot about behavior. How are you going to steer towards your employees or not? So it's, for instance, nice to see that for Ambessify, the number of companies who are interested in your software is growing, and they are thinking about how can we engage with our employees at home in these COVID times. But would they do the same if we didn't have COVID? So how transparent and authentic is this connection? Now, the third phase is more about acting, using your communications and your behavior to steer the process you want to reach. And the last phase is about check. It's about, have you attained the goals you want to reach? So it's fairly simple to think about, who am I as an employer? Which data can we use? What is our strategy to execute and to measure? But implementing this in a country, into a specific company is not that easy.
Yeah, into a country would probably be even
More
harder.
harder. Yeah.
Okay, let's deep dive into the questions. We try to make them as practical as possible, so it's always based on real life cases. So one of our customers is KBC, and one of the main questions when we started to work with them is, so should we include the full workforce, basically, and how can we include them into our employer branding strategy? And I just want to elaborate a bit on the effect on how we do this at Embasify, and to see if you approve or disapprove of this approach. Both are perfectly fine. So we always offer two options to our customers. The first one is intention-based. People basically fill in a form, they can check boxes based on their interest, and they will receive relevant company messaging around those interests. Obviously, they might have been drunk, they might have been on the toilet while filing this form, you know, so it's intention-based. I have the intention to do stuff for the brand or to interact with the brand. What I personally like a lot is when we work through behavior-based mechanics. So we will test the employee database up front. We will ask them to fill in a net promoter score, for example. How likely are you to recommend KBC to your friends and family? Score from 0 to 10. I don't have to explain you. A few weeks later, we might ask them to share something on their own social media, so it's more trustworthy. A few weeks later, we might ask their input in a poll, etc. And based on that behavior-driven, we will make a selection of the best possible ambassadors, employee ambassadors for that company. Which of those two options relate the most with how you look at this specific subject?
Yeah. Let me first off start saying that I think it's good to at least start with using your employees and asking them, what do you think?
Yes.
Because I still see a lot of organizations that work top down and say, well, we are management. This is how we are going to position ourselves. By the way, this is our employer brand because this is our vision and how we want to attract people from the labor market. My first question is, so what do your employees think? And these organizations have trouble to give a proper answer. So it's good to always engage with your employees. Now, making a choice between these two options, I would prefer the latter because you're thinking about behavior. Elements like, would you be able to recommend your employer and why? And which elements are important is very crucial and is also a very important element of the employer value proposition. Yeah. Which we'll probably talk about later. But attracting and using these employees based on their behavior is a very smart thing to do. The note I would like to add to this is that it's important to think about how representative are the employees you are going to use in order to communicate the elements you would like to communicate towards internally and externally on the labor market. Because if you have, let's say, 100 employees and 5 of them are the best possible ambassadors of your organization, what does that mean? Does it mean that these 95 others are not relevant? Or
is it biased?
Is there a bias in it? Yeah. And if these 5 are extremely happy with working at your organization, but overall the organization is not the greatest place to work, these 5 are not representative for your total profile.
Yeah, that's a very good remark. Also relates to the next question about, is it even realistic that all employees are involved, or should all employees be involved? I think at least they should be offered the chance to be involved in a program as this, because when we look at the hard numbers, as you can see on the slides, when we invite people through the intention or behavior-based mechanics into our platform, The first wave in general is 10 to 15% of all employees, especially when you're a big company, and we work typically with large companies, KBC, Barco, Lidl, Infrabel, companies with maybe 10,000 people, then 10% still is very decent range of people to start with. But how do you look at that? Do you think we should still, in next waves, we can obviously enlarge that number, but do you still think that we should try to get more people into the system? Or do you think when we talk about these kind of volumes, that that's workable and that there is enough different kind of profiles in that segment to put your employer brand in the market?
Well, you kind of give the answer to your own question, and it's connected to the answer I just gave. It's if you have, for instance, 1,000 people who answer for 10,000 population, you should be able to discover if this is a representative segment of your organization. If, for instance, these 1,000 are just men who are over 50, but your workforce is also half based on women who are maybe 28 on average. Yeah. This is, you could say, well, we have 1,000 out of 10,000, yeah. But it's still not enough. It should, maybe even 500 would be better if they are divided into men and women who are 28 and representative yeah. of the total skill set. Yeah. So it's not a question of the amount, but it's about the segmentation yeah, of the different.
Exactly, segmentation, quality over quantity, basically. Okay, cool. Moving to the next case study, Barco has been a customer of ours for quite a few years already, and now they're doing a lot of different stuff, but completely in the beginning they focused on employee advocacy. So they invited a group of 500 people who wanted to join the program. Around 300 of those people were very active, and after 1 year they got amazing results by letting company messaging be shared through the employees on their own social and more trustworthy networks, basically. When we look at the numbers after 1 year, they're quite impressive. As you can see, they received a lot of traffic to the site. They saved over 100,000 in media spend, so money they would normally have invested in advertisements, but not necessary now anymore because they could just use that money to run the program and do additional things around that. And specifically a high increase in engagement on the social media posts, etc. So all went very well. They expanded the program now, just signed a new contract, everything is going well. But my main question is, okay, this is really employee advocacy. How do you think this relates to employer branding or to employee engagement? Because there are a lot of those terms out there, and I'm also using them in mixed ways most of the time, to be honest, as you probably noticed already. So my main question is, what is a subpart of what, you know? Where does employer branding stand? Does it need to have all these components, or is that not necessary? How do you look at that?
Yeah, it strongly depends on how you define employer branding. When I look back from the early 19th, when I started with this subject, employer branding was almost equal to labor market communications, so externally focused. In the last 20 years, 30 years, it became more and more also about internal branding and defining who you are as an organization. To me, employer branding is the overall strategy. Mm-hmm. It is very closely linked to how you want to position yourself as an organization, because as an organization you want to conquer a certain market. To do that, you need technology, but you also need the people to work with that technology. So yeah, your employer brand is crucial. Then the elements of the overall management, HR and communications is important. And a subset of that is how you can use your strategy to define your employer value proposition, which is another element, which is also a subpart of employer branding as overall. Now, in your employer value proposition, it defines who you are as an organization. Mm-hmm. You also start to think, how can we activate your employer value proposition? Mm-hmm. And one of the elements you can use in the third phase, the ACT phase, is use your employees to communicate what you want to communicate. Okay. So I basically see, if you have 3 terms, and there are a lot of more out there, it's about overall employer branding. An element of that is the employer value proposition. And in order to communicate your employer value proposition, you can use employee advocacy to improve your employee engagement.
Yeah. Okay.
At least that's the way how I see it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Let's go to a movie.
Everybody come on. 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 Everybody come on.
Okay, great, Yves. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me give a little bit of the backstory here. So this is a video that KBC showed to their customers. So they had 2 commercials running on television, and then the employees basically could decide which of the 2 options they liked best, so that KBC in the future can make a web series out of this or create a new commercial, etc. I don't know which one of the 2 that you preferred, but going a bit deeper on this, how far should employees be involved in the decision-making process of an organization? Should employees, for example, get this checklist and decide on, okay, this person should be our new CEO? That might go a bit too far, you know? So where's the balance there? How far should they be involved to feel more engaged, to feel that they belong more to the organization? Because that's the main goal here.
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. Especially should employees think about who should be their CEO or not? Yes. It strongly depends on your company culture and on how large your organization is. I personally think that the employees should have a lot of influence on how your employer brand should be built and how your organization should develop. But there are elements which should be decided by management, because there are elements that are simply not the responsibility of employees. So which market should we conquer? Which products should we launch? I still think that the input of employees is crucial. But if your organization wants to take a new turn, they look at different developments within the market, something most employees are not considering. They should have some impact and at least look at it, but they shouldn't be finally responsible for what happens within an organization. So I would say maybe 70% is important based on what employees think, but crucial decisions should still be made by your CEO and higher management. Yeah. But it shouldn't be 100% management or 100% employees either.
Makes sense. Moving on, Revival Animal is one of our, I think one of our smallest customers, to be honest. They're only 50 or 60 people. So in the beginning,
what do they do?
They support good causes related to animals, basically.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very nice mission, and it's also one of the reasons that we decided to still work with them, although that we typically focus on larger customers as Bayer, KPMG, etc. So it's a bit of an atypical customer for us. So we were a bit worried in the beginning, to be honest. Okay, what's going to happen here? But then the cool thing that we saw is we talked about the 10-15% engagement rates in the first wave with large companies. In this case, it was almost 100%, you know? So almost everyone in the company joined the program. So that's also very interesting. And also, when they started to send out campaigns and challenges to these customers, the response rates were very high. For example, the visual that you see here shows the food that they could pick for the next event, for example. Very simple question, but it gives them the sense of belonging to the higher mission of the organization, etc. And almost all companies made their pick and also ate that at the next event. So it's very nice also to, I think, when you do something, that you really see immediate effects of that afterwards, because then you really feel that you are having a voice. So the main question is, does size matter, basically, in this specific context?
Well, when you think about size and large organizations, without a doubt, they have more exposure. So they have more impact when you think about using their media to influence people, especially on the labor market itself. I personally believe that your internal brand is most crucial and most determining to exploit your employer brand. And even then, large organizations have a larger number of employees. So you would think that larger organizations are more crucial in that aspect than smaller organizations. However, and that's interesting of the case you just mentioned, it's a smaller organization, but with a very clear and distinguishing sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And if you're connected to the purpose, it doesn't really matter how large or how small you are. And you see from this example, smaller organizations, people are more related towards the purpose, helping others. And if you then use aspects and your tool, for instance, to say, well, do you want to share this message? Or what do you want to eat for lunch? More people are engaged and eager to reply to your question. Yeah. And another aspect I just thought of is that connecting on a human level, which is kind of a different aspect, but very crucial when you think about behavior. Connecting on a human level is that much easier if you are a smaller organization.
Yeah.
The CEO walks through the office or talks online to people. So what did you do last week? And that's difficult if you have 10,000 people. You can't talk to everybody at the same time. So connecting at a human level makes it easier to be engaged or not, and to attract the right people. Yeah. And in that sense, a smaller organization works better.
Yeah. Oh, those are great remarks. Also, in the case of Revival Animal, one of their main use cases was to get more reviews on Glassdoor or Indeed. We all know how important these sites are becoming in the employer branding space. So even in Belgium now, people are checking these sites. You get an idea of the wage that you should be making in the company. But specifically, you can read reviews from people that left the company or are still in the company about how it is to work at the company. So it's extremely important. They only had 5. It's a small company, so percentage-wise, it's pretty okay. They had 5 reviews. But by first completing those smaller kinds of campaigns, like, hey, we're organizing this next team dinner, what do you want to eat? In the next phase, hey, we're going to donate a few $1,000s to a good cause. People came up with 20 different good causes, and other people within the organization could upvote these causes. And the cool thing, again, was that they also saw that the company put the money where their mouth was, basically. You see, they really did what they said. Yeah, and when you do that, and you then ask them to do something for the brand, like, hey, would be cool to write an honest review on Glassdoor, then we saw amazing result. We saw a 300% increase in just a few weeks' time. And now today, when you go to their profile, you will see 20 or up to 25 reviews for such a small company, which builds a lot of momentum and which really builds their employer brand. So how important are these sites becoming today? Because we just spoke about Glassdoor, Indeed, but specifically in the software space where we are in, you have G2, G2 Crowd, Capterra, etc. And we see that a lot of leads are coming from those websites these days. That's why we are saying, you know, those comparison review websites are basically the new SEO juice. Back in the day, you had to invest a lot of money in SEO to get people to come to your site, or in paid, but paid is not that trustworthy by nature. But now when you Google certain companies, first thing you see will be the Google reviews, etc. You will see the websites that have aggregated reviews on them. So how important are these sites becoming, and how are you involving this specifically with the clients that you're working with? It's a long question, I know.
No.
But it's one question this time.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think it's a very crucial element, at least a crucial question. And my answer is this. I think that review sites became more important. I specifically said became and not are becoming. Yeah. Because they gave you a sense of how it would be to work at a certain organization. In the old days, it was just about when you sat at a local birthday party and said, well, I hear that you work at company X and
Yeah.
Y. What do you think? Well, it's a great organization, or I don't like this aspect, or my boss, or so you get a feel for it.
Yeah. Which still is great, by the way. The offline word of mouth.
Which I personally think is more credible because
Yeah.
people are more open to it. What I like about these review sites is that originally they started as translating what is discussed at these birthday parties towards an online rating. So it gives you a feel of the organization. What I see lately is that these organizations also have these rating organizations have also a commercial aspect, which is fine.
Yeah.
But they are driving and using this to influence the ratings of the organizations. And employers also understand that. They understand, well, if you get a rating of a 4.5 or 5 at Glassdoor, people would be more eager to work at our organization.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the difficulty exists for how credible is this. I think that review sites are still great for someone who thinks, well, should I work at this organization or not? To get a first feel.
Yeah.
But don't believe everything you read on review sites.
Yeah.
But use it to talk to someone you know at the organization or through your network, maybe via LinkedIn or at this birthday party, to say, well, what's it really like to work this? And what's it like at department X or department Y? Because usually that's very different. Maybe the organization as a whole is interesting, but one of the different departments is not as interesting. So it can help you to gain certain insight, but it shouldn't be the total disposition.
Then you basically let them be validated on those offline gatherings, events, phone calls, etc., like the good old reference calls, etc. I also think that an important thing to notice there is that people believe those sites more when it's not all raving 5-star reviews, you know. So research shows that people trust those sites more when it's 4.2 and there were some bad reviews on there. Those could have been bad levers, by the way, because most of the people that write reviews
But it says something about credibility.
But yeah, the credibility is key there.
Yeah, and I think when you look at your overall employer brand strategy, referring back to the blueprint and the second phase, what should be your strategy, you also define KPIs.
Yeah.
One of them are hard KPIs, for instance, how many visitors do we get on our working site, and also soft aspects for how do we treat people, are we able to promote the nicest people or just the hard workers. And I think that your reviews of Glassdoor or sites like that should be one of your KPIs, but not the single KPI.
Yeah.
It should be an aspect.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Moving to recruitment, which is also an essential part of employer branding, I think. Personally, we work a lot with social recruitment, so we can, let's say that you share something on your Twitter today, a vacancy, and it gets filled 6 months later. We can even link with the ATS, application tracking system, and see, oh, Yves has been responsible for this, and maybe reward you one way or the other. So the technology is there. It's not a question of technology. The main question is, there are obviously pluses here, like huge cost savings. On the slide, we mentioned $3,000, but when I compare this with the recruitment fees that are being offered, to me, they're quite a bit higher, to be honest.
It depends on your sector and the profession. But,
Indeed. And the specifics of the profile also. The downside I sometimes hear about when I'm talking about this with companies is, but then we will get more of the same. More of the same companies will join because their networks probably will have more of those people in their networks, more of the same. That's a remark I hear a lot. Do you agree with that? Do you have a completely different vision on that topic?
But going back to the beginning of your question, I think recruitment is a crucial part of employer branding, but recruitment isn't just the same as employer branding. It's about attracting new people, but it's also about retaining the right people. Yeah. So the element that sets everything apart from recruitment as such is, what is your company culture? And your company culture is based on the people who work at your organization, and you can use these use in a positive sense these people, for instance, via social media, to attract new people. Now, will they attract the same people? I think somewhat this is true, but I always explain this to people who say, well, won't we get all of the same people? And I ask, well, if you would recommend someone from your network or from your friends who you would think would be able to do great at this company, what kind of friends do you have? Well, I have this friend and this friend, and well, tell me about their background. Well, this one is from Belgium. I have a friend from the Netherlands. This is a woman who used to live in the Caribbean, and so they have a network which isn't exactly the same. At least that goes for me. I don't have all of the same kind of friends in my network, so I won't be able to attract all of the same Yves. Yeah. They have elements which reflect the values of an organization, which reflect values I have as a person as well.
Which should be good.
Which is good, which is crucial also for your employer brand strategy, because that should be based on human values. But that doesn't mean it's the exact same people. Yeah. But it's a common value that they share, and that's exactly the people you would like to attract.
Yeah, we see this with one of our customers, Koenen Nagel, a big logistics player. And for every vacancy that they send out, on average, through their employees, they will get 16 referrals, 16. So that's very high. So this is not just talk with this guy. No, this is really filling in a form with the telephone number, motivation, etc. We also see that they are hiring people through that process, so that it's working great for companies like them. In other cases, I just see people sharing this on social without much context, without really being linked to like a specific referral form, so it feels a bit cheaper, you know. And I also had the feeling that the results are much less when you work in that specific way.
Yeah, it depends on how engaged the people who work at this organization are with the organization, and what is the purpose of the employee and the organization as a whole. If this reflects who works at the organization, you're much more eager to fill out the complete form. Because when you fill out this form and you recommend somebody, your reputation as a person is also on the line.
Exactly.
And if you feel that you are heard within the organization and you are at home, you're eager to, for instance, reflect or give 16 people to apply. But if you're not, you will just hit share and then think, well, hopefully somebody will come out and I'll get a pie, for instance. But then you're not truly engaged.
No, but that's a great remark, like putting your own reputation on the line and not just doing it because the company is asking it. And that's also where the identification process that we talked about in the beginning might help by asking the right questions.
Do you feel obliged to share?
Yes. Exactly.
Or do you want to share? There's a big difference.
Okay, great. I want to talk about the joint session that we will be doing. So in the next few weeks and months, when travel is easier again, I suppose, even I would like to directly come into your offices. So for the people that are still watching this, one of my colleagues will pick out one lucky winner, and we will spend the day at your office, half a day. We'll talk about the framework that Yves is specialist in, and the other half of the day we will talk about the advocacy wheel. That's a strategic session that we do at Embasify to identify if you even need to do advocacy and employer branding activities and the way that you want to do those. So you don't have to do anything else. We will reach out to one of the winners, and in the follow-up, where you will also see the webinar recording, we will mention the winner, and Yves and I should be in your office before you know it, right? Great. Yves, thank you so much. Anything else, like final thoughts, final pointers, final tips on employer branding you want to share?
Maybe two. One of them is employer branding is not just about HR or corporate communications. It's about connecting and explaining to your management why this is important. So focus on the financial return of your employer brand. And the other is, and that's basically one of the basic rules, is Employer branding is important. We see the developments. But do you think employer branding is important? And do you put your money where your mouth is? Because it's about human interests. Are you really interested in the people who work at your organization? Or are you a spreadsheet manager? It's about the employees. And are you interested in who they represent and who they are as a person? Because if you do that, employer branding is kind of easy.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Yves. I have a lot of other questions, so let's do this again in the future. That should be great. Thank you for coming all the way from the Netherlands to beautiful Belgium, and let's see each other next time, and let's see you as well next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.